Welcome back to Copenhagen Blue. Today we are going to replace an alternator on a 2013 Chrysler Town Country. It's my neighbor's car, and turns out that his battery light was coming on, so he called me over. I checked it out, and it seems like it's making pretty low voltage. It's right around, what was it? I think it's under 12. It was 11.38 maybe. There were a couple times it would spike up, but it's enough to trigger the car to thinking that the alternator is not outputting enough voltage. So we're going to run the Altel and see what kind of voltage we're getting. As long as it's still low, we're going to put an alternator on it, and hopefully it remedies this issue. Let's get started. So now it's holding pretty steady at 13.8. It's kind of fluctuated down about 13.6, as high as 13.9. I can't say that I'd condemn it based off these figures, and he's not getting any abnormal readings like he did before. I mean, I went over to his house and it was reading well below that. I don't know if I have any of that data stored. Let's see. Okay, so before what we had was a P063A. Apparently I did store it in my Altel. That is a PCM code that's set for alternator output voltage is less than battery feed circuit voltage. So it's not doing it now, but if it's intermittent, it's going to come back. So I guess we might as well just put an alternator on it. We already have the part, so might as well just get it done. Start by getting the vehicle up in the air. We took off the right wheel, and we're going to take out these plugs here so that we can get a better look at where the alternator is. So we took off those two clips. We also undid one Phillips head screw. You probably have a second one here. This car only had one. Looks like we could probably put another one in there to replace it. Peeled back the wheel liner and kind of tucked it up out of the way. We have one more panel to get out of the way before we have access to where the compressor and the alternator are. Underneath the car, you have two 10mm bolts. Take those off. Set that splash shield to the side. So that gives us access to see up there. We have our alternator, we have our AC compressor. So what we're going to do, I think, we're not going to break these lines open for our AC compressor, but I think we're going to undo everything for the alternator. We're going to unbolt our AC compressor so it's out of the way, which gives us room to get our alternator down and out of the way. But first things first, we have to take off our belt, which is held in by a tensioner right here. So we're going to put on a ratchet, or in my case, we're going to do a serpentine belt removal tool, and we're going to take the AC or the serpentine belt off. All right, let's take a look at the alternator that my neighbor got. Okay. It's an alternator in a bag. So that's how I like my alternators. You get them this way, they're really fresh. Alright, so it appears this is correct. 2 bolts on the bottom, 1 bolt on the top. Alright. Let's see, we have our connector for our positive, and we have our signal from the car. First thing before we do anything, we disconnected our battery. So we start off with way up here. I don't know if you can see my hands. We have the two 13mm bolts up here, left and right. We have our 13mm here that we're going to need a deep well for. We have our AC compressor ones here that we'll need a deep well for. So we have to take off this plastic piece on top of the stud here. It's crimped on top, and then they get that one and this one and those 4 bolts, and we should be able to move the AC compressor out of the way and then get the alternator out of the way. Long one for the compressor, another long bolt for the compressor, but as you can see, it's not quite, nope, actually I'm sorry, it is the same. Disregard. Alright. We have a top one for the alternator, different from obviously the compressor, so we're gonna set that somewhere different. We have another one for the alternator. And it's not exactly easy to see, but down on the alternator, down there's a connector that we have to get undone. And then there's also a harness that connects to the actual alternator itself that we have to unbolt. And then all the connections will be off the alternator itself. Alright, so up on here, after we take out the 13mm bolt on here, there's actually a stud that we need to take out because you can't slide the alternator off far enough. And we're going to use actually a standard 7/32 socket to loosen that up. And I already broke it free, but I just wanted to show you how it goes on the end here. Alright, holy crap. That was a lot of thread for something that shouldn't have taken that long. At this point, the stud really became a problem that I couldn't get it out. The head had rounded off and I couldn't get the 7/32 socket to grab onto it. I tried vice grips, I tried all sorts of stuff, and nothing would work. So I couldn't get the compressor as far forward and down as I really needed to. If I could, it probably would have come out pretty easily. But this literally turned into the crappiest game of Tetris ever for about 15 to 20 minutes, and just almost there every time, and just not quite enough until finally I was able to get just the right position. You're almost there. Obviously that one stud in the way, but finally, after what seems forever, I have the alternator out. If you can't get the studs on the top of the compressor out, you're gonna have a fight. So undo the 13mm and then undo the studs. And the right one wouldn't come out for me. So that was fun. Smashed my finger and my pinky. Okay, hey, let's install the new one. Okay. Ha, 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 ha. Ha. Fuck. Ha. Motherfucker. Ha, ha, ha. Stud back in for the alternator. So that at least holds it up, and then we can put the compressor back in. Which you temporarily put a nut or a bolt up in for the alternator. We're putting this stud back in, which is almost bottomed out. Now it is, which means we can put a nut back on there. We're going to put that stud back in for the top of the compressor. That one obviously up there, we never freaking got out. So we're just going to put a nut back on there. Put our two bolts back in down here. Tighten up the alternator. Reconnect our plug up here for the alternator, which we could probably do right now. A nice click. And then we have to hook up our power wire that goes to the alternator with the 13mm bolt as soon as I find the other end of the harness. Okie dokie, everything's reconnected. I've got all the 13mm nuts on, bolts in. I've got the 13mm nut on the stud for the alternator, the two at the top. We're going to reattach the 13mm nut on the alternator along with the plug and put the cap back on. Now we need to put the splash shield back on that goes here, fender liner, put the wheel on, and serpentine belt. Serpentine. It's got to go on. Going to reattach the positive cable. Go ahead and start it. Okay, we have live data. It's going to read through everything. Comes up with complete list. And let's scroll down as we start to get information coming in. So we have 14.082. Let's go up and let's load our graphic. Put on our headlights. We have a nice 13.9, 14, 5, 13.9, 14. Turn on the heated steering wheel. Heated seat. Heated seat. Okay. So before we were getting down to like 13.6 and we were going up, and now the car's staying nice and steady right around 14. I'm going to say that we have some success. Well, we have a drop there, but still 13.97. Kick back up. Much smoother line. Alright, I'm happy with that. But it's a good time to let my neighbor know that he needs a new lower motor mount there in the front, as well as he needs sway bar links because the bushings are torn on both ends. Okay, so it wasn't the worst job, wasn't the best job. I wish you could get the alternator from the top, which I almost think if you jack the motor up, maybe you could do it somehow like that. But yeah, the way I tried to do it was just through the bottom. If you're gonna undo the compressor, make sure those two studs come out first, because that made that job way worse than it probably had to be. But it was able to get done. A lot of swearing, but I was able to get it done. Certainly wouldn't mind doing it again, I guess, if I really had to. But I appreciate you taking the time to watch. Hit like, hit subscribe, and I'll see you next time.